The lifespan of a film camera is a very interesting prospect. These were designed back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, and are now, by virtue of the internet and post-COVID situations, seeing a resurgence of interest. People really enjoy the prospect of film photography. So we see a lot of these cameras getting a second lease on life with younger audiences and in a completely different applications than what they were originally designed for. All that to be said, this camera is one that will unfortunately die. It is, as you may know, the Olympus OM4. Now this and its kind of cousin camera, sister camera, however you want to describe it, the OM2S program, both are plagued with very notable and distinct electronic issues. The flex board goes bad, and the camera basically cosplays as a brick from then on. As far as I know, nobody really wants to work on these, and I don't think that there are any other parts. So when this goes, it goes. Very similar to situations like the Contax T2, Fuji GX645, the fucking whatever camera. Any of these cameras that have these very distinct issues, unless there are parts being recreated for them, they're going to die. But until they do, I still think they're worth talking about, and I still think they're worth shooting with. It's a situation in which you don't know when it's going to happen, so you might as well enjoy it while it lasts. Now, the interesting thing about the Olympus OM series in general, that they were constantly on the bleeding edge of innovation, constantly trying to find new ways to revolutionize either the metering system in the camera, the auto system, the electronics, all of those things, and the OM4 is no exception. Now, unfortunately, I am not wearing my technical information hat today. This is more of my artistic walk and talk, ramble about different things I like about the camera hat. So in order to get into the specific details about this camera, I'm going to send it back to a different version of me to do that. Preferably one with internet access and a screen with everything detailed out. I have my technical specification hat on currently, and we're going to break down some of the things that make the OM4 the technical innovation that it is. And first and foremost, it has a top shutter speed of 1/2000th of a second, which is faster than the OM1, OM2, and the OM10. It was battery dependent to achieve a lot of those speeds, except for the bulb and 1/60th. Those can be achieved mechanically. All the other range of speeds need to be achieved with electronics, which is 2 LR44 batteries in the bottom of the camera. Importantly, the camera does not really have an on-off switch. It will just kind of power off on itself after a few seconds of not being used, or if you select the bulb or 60 mechanical settings, then it will kind of power off. Electronic charges won't be running through the system. It is the first camera to have built-in multi-spot exposure metering, which could take up to 8 different measurements of light and combine that to reach a total of what the exposure of the image should be. It also featured a high and a low, so you can select the highlight or the shadows of the image and get the exposure for just those 2 areas. The LCD, which I mentioned maybe later in the video, I don't really remember, was revolutionary for the time, showing what the exposure was required versus what the camera settings were at. It also does have a backlight feature, so even though it does have a lot of contrast, making it easier to be seen in certain conditions, the backlight does provide more flexibility in when you can view the information on the LCD. It features a stronger chassis than the OM1 and the OM2, although it is a similar form. It is built a little bit stronger, and the OM4 Ti and the OM4T are both called that because of the titanium top-bottom plates. Another notable features, I might have mentioned this as well, it does have a built-in hot shoe as opposed to the OM1 and the OM2, which had a hot shoe that you had to connect yourself. So that is a nice upgrade, as well as weatherproof gasketing around the top and bottom, different parts of the camera, making it weatherproof. Not necessarily waterproof, but weatherproof to some degree. So that's pretty much it for the general facts about the camera. There's obviously a lot more to get into about the specific mechanisms and things like that, but for all intents and purposes, this is a very modern system. Modern by today's standards, I would say the metering is very intuitive, it's very intelligent, so the fact that it came out so many years ago is very impressive to say the least, and as always a continuing proof to the testament that Olympus is always pushing the boundaries of what their film cameras could achieve. So back to the fun version of me that's walking around in the park and is about to talk about James Bond for maybe a little bit too long. All right, now that he's had his fun, let's actually talk about the camera. The physical footprint of it is fascinating. It's very similar to all of the other OM cameras that were released. The OM1 has a very similar footprint. The OM2, very similar footprint, and the OM3, I believe. I don't think I've seen OM3, but all very much the same layout, the same design, a lot of the same physical components, which is nice because it gives you an easier understanding and appreciation for all those things. It's the foundational piece. Check out my Olympus M1 review video. This is the culmination of all of those, very similar to the Pentax LX, a video I made while at this very same spot. Actually, I was over there, and I spoke about how the LX refines all of the innovations that Pentax made over the lifespan of their time making SLRs and refined it into this singular system. Olympus did the same thing with the OM4 and then added a lot of sauce. Sometimes the sauce is a little watered down, sometimes the flex board will break, but still it is a very unique Olympus system. It holds on to the basic principles of what that means. It's small, compact form, similar layout for your on-off switch. Even with the M1 and the OM1, it's all the hits and then more. You see, the other reason I really want to talk about this camera is it was actually featured in the opening title sequence of one of my favorite Bond movies. That is, of course, License to Kill, starring none other than Timothy Dalton, my personal pick for my favorite Bond. We can have this discussion at a later time. Now, in the movie, I believe he actually uses a Hasselblad 500 as like a outfitted sniper rifle, but in the title sequence, there is an OM4. And in that movie, while he is gone down to Central America to track down a ruthless cult that's actually drug cartel masquerading as a cult, who kills his friend Sharky and others, it has a very epic boat chase and submersible chase off the coast of Miami, ends in a giant semi-truck drive through Bolivia. I think it's Bolivia, but neither here nor there. Fantastic film. Very true to form, though, in an Olympus kind of fashion. This camera is kitted up to the nines, like a Bond gadget should be. But also similar to Olympus products, it still has that essence of simplicity. I feel like this is a camera that anyone can pick up and use. And while we're talking about the second life of film cameras, the OM4 is highly sought after because it has an incredibly intuitive and intelligent metering system that's very modern, given the fact that this camera, I believe, came out in the late 80s up to the early 2000s. This is a very modern design, but in a very classic retro build. But beyond that, it does have the simplicity that a beginner would look for in a film camera. Now, I'm shooting with Portra 160, so these shots will probably all be very dim and not good, but the point is not the photos themselves, the point is the camera. The sublime nature in which the Advance tugs along is reminiscent of the smoothness from an OM2. The form factor is very similar to an OM1. There are these very acute quality of life differences that have been made to the system. The viewfinder is incredibly bright. The light meter, although it's a kind of dimly lit LCD screen, is still very contrasty, very easy to see. I might not understand exactly what I'm looking at, but it's still very nice to use nonetheless. What a beautiful day, too. Now, when I do these reviews, there is an underlying note of sadness, and that is due to the fact that the world in which these cameras were built no longer exists. See, in the modern day, it's much easier to just take a picture with your phone than it would be to take a picture with a film camera. Film can be expensive, it can be unreliable, too many variables for most people to deal with. And this camera, the OM4, is a poster child for the problems that people have with film photography. The OM4 is not an affordable camera for most people. You can probably get a couple OM2s for the cost of one of these, and I would argue that the OM2 is a better camera. And of course, there is just the obvious reality that this is not a long time kind of camera. This is not something you can really depend upon, and it's not something I would recommend you depend upon. However, with all of that being said, it's still one of those cameras that I look at, and it has a hero camera-like quality. This is the top of the line. This is the pinnacle of Olympus's technological achievements, of all of their innovations through all their different cameras, all culminating into this, the apex of what they can do. And as I obsess about the little notes and the little differences between each brand of camera, the OM system is so good at carrying each single mechanical feature from one system to the next. The shell of this camera is virtually identical to the shell of an OM1. To see that truth to form is really special for me. Even though I am fully aware of the limited lifespan that this camera might have left, I feel like that adds fuel to the fire of excitement you get with shooting with it. Because no longer are you just taking pictures, no longer are you just shooting film, you're now also in a race against the clock. You're trying to get as many photos on this camera as you can before the Grim Reaper shows up to reclaim its soul or circuit board. And that is just an experience that I can't really think about having with the prospect of something like digital photography or even shooting photos with your phone. You know, you run out of storage or drop your phone and it breaks or the camera breaks or any of these happen. And in my mind, it's just more or less of an inconvenience, a frustration. It's, oh, now I've got to spend all this extra money to get a new system or to try to get a fixer, any of those things. But I think with film photography, it's different because we're operating on borrowed time. You probably didn't get these cameras new, and if you did, you bought them a long time ago. And I think every day that they continue to work is flying in the face of the fact that these cameras were not meant to live for this long. The natural progression from film photography is digital photography to some extent. So the fact that we're able to use these relics is impressive. But it does fill me with a complicated sense of feelings because on one hand, I can acknowledge the enjoyment I've had shooting with this camera, and I can acknowledge the impressive technological innovations that this camera presented to the world. On the other hand, I can't get over the fact that it is probably one of the more unreliable systems out there and does come in at a pretty hefty cost. So in the grand scheme of things, there are way better cameras to spend your money on that will work a lot better and that can be serviced to prolong their lifespan. And unfortunately at this position, at this place, the OM4 is not one of those. I would recommend an OM1, an OM2, really exceptional camera systems there, keeps you in the OM family. But the OM4 does hold a very special place in my heart for some reason. It has this hero camera quality to it, and upon shooting with it, I do understand what the hype is about. Not enough to try to get me to fork over $400 to buy one, but enough to where I can actually understand where people are coming from when they say that this might be their favorite film camera. At the end of the day, it's not long for this world. So I want to thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like it if you did. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future content. Thank you again, and I will catch you on the next one. This has been a real shit video. I just want to point that out. So future me who's editing this, really good work.